The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, innocuous and white, bearing the logo of the Grand Vista Resort. David tore it open absently while sipping his coffee, expecting nothing more than a standard billing statement for his wife's recent girls' trip. What he found instead would shatter his world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. His eyes scanned the itemized charges: room service for two, champagne, late-night minibar purchases. Nothing seemed unusual until he reached the bottom of the second page. There, clipped to the invoice, were several grainy screenshots labeled security footage, hallway incidents. His hands trembled as he studied the images more closely. The first photo showed his wife, Sarah, in the hotel corridor at 2:47 a.m., pressed against a man who definitely wasn't him. Her arms were wrapped around the stranger's neck, their faces inches apart in an unmistakable moment of intimacy. The second image was worse, her fumbling with a keycard while the man's hands roamed freely across her body. The timestamp read 2:51 a.m. The third showed them entering a room together, her head thrown back in laughter. David's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile. The sound echoed through the empty house, but he barely heard it. His mind raced through the past 3 weeks since Sarah had returned from her trip. She'd been cheerful, relaxed even, regaling him with stories about spa treatments and wine tastings with her 3 best friends. Not once had she seemed guilty or distant. Not once had he suspected a thing. He picked up his phone with shaking hands, then set it down again. Who could he call? Who would understand? Then he remembered, Sarah hadn't gone alone. 3 other wives had joined her: Rebecca, Jennifer, and Amanda. If the hotel had sent him this documentation, had they sent similar evidence to the other husbands? The thought consumed him. David grabbed his laptop and pulled up his email, composing a careful message to Robert, Jennifer's husband. They'd met dozens of times at neighborhood gatherings, had even watched football together on occasion. Need to talk. Urgent. Can you meet for coffee this afternoon? He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Within 10 minutes, his phone buzzed. Robert's reply was terse. Got something in the mail too. I'll be there. David sent similar messages to James and Thomas, the husbands of Rebecca and Amanda respectively. Both responded within the hour, their messages carrying the same undertone of shock and barely contained rage. They agreed to meet at a quiet diner across town, far from their suburban neighborhood where gossip spread like wildfire. That afternoon, 4 men sat in a corner booth, each clutching an envelope from the Grand Vista Resort. The silence was suffocating as they laid their evidence on the table like detectives comparing crime scene photos. The pattern was unmistakable and devastating. Each wife had been photographed in compromising positions with different men. The timestamps showed a coordinated deception. While one couple disappeared into a room, the others kept watch or created distractions. They planned this, James said finally, his voice hollow. His screenshots showed Rebecca kissing a man by the pool bar, then later leading him toward the elevators. This wasn't some drunken mistake. They coordinated it. Thomas nodded slowly, his jaw clenched so tight David could see the muscles twitching. Amanda told me they barely left the hotel. Said they were too tired from the spa treatments. His laugh was bitter, broken. She looked me straight in the eye and lied without flinching. Robert spread his hands across the photos of Jennifer, his wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. 22 years, he whispered. We've been married 22 years. We have 3 kids in college. And she throws it all away for what? A weekend fling with some random guy. David felt something shift inside him, the shock transforming into cold, calculated anger. We need to decide how we're going to handle this. Together. The other men looked up, and he saw his own fury reflected in their eyes. They went on this trip together. They cheated together. They lied together. So we respond together. The plan began to take shape. The 4 men spent the next week gathering evidence with the methodical precision of prosecutors building a case. They met in David's garage each evening after work, away from prying eyes and curious neighbors. What started as raw emotion had crystallized into something more focused, more purposeful. They weren't just hurt husbands anymore, they were investigators uncovering a conspiracy that had been hidden in plain sight. David had always been the analytical one, a systems engineer by trade, and he approached their situation like a complex problem requiring a comprehensive solution. He created a shared digital folder, password-protected and encrypted, where they uploaded every piece of evidence they could find. The hotel screenshots were just the beginning. Thomas discovered that his credit card had been used to purchase a bottle of expensive tequila from the hotel bar at midnight, while Amanda had told him she was asleep. When he called the hotel's billing department pretending to dispute the charge, a helpful clerk mentioned that surveillance showed 4 women and 4 men sharing the bottle on the rooftop terrace. "Quite the party," the clerk had said cheerfully, not knowing she was hammering another nail into the coffin of 4 marriages. James took a different approach. He recovered deleted text messages from Rebecca's phone while she was in the shower, using recovery software he'd found online. What he discovered made his blood run cold. There was a group chat between the 4 wives, dating back 3 months before the trip. They'd planned everything: which hotel to choose for its lax security and party atmosphere, which nights to go out, even how to coordinate their alibis. One message from Sarah read, "Make sure you post photos of just us girls at dinner. Tag the restaurant and timestamp it. That's our cover if anyone asks questions later." Another from Amanda, "Delete everything after the trip. No evidence, no problem." Jennifer had responded with a laughing emoji, "What happens at the Grand Vista stays at the Grand Vista." But the most damning evidence came from Robert's discovery. He'd noticed Jennifer acting protective of her email account, changing her password and closing her laptop whenever he entered the room. One night, while she slept, he used her thumbprint to unlock her phone and found correspondence with someone named Miguel. The email chain told the entire story. Miguel worked as a bartender at the Grand Vista. He and his 3 friends, all hotel employees, had done this before. They'd identified groups of women traveling without their husbands, offered them attention and excitement, and turned girls' trips into affairs. The emails revealed a calculated seduction, with Miguel coaching Jennifer on what to tell her husband, how to act normal, when to show affection to avoid suspicion. "It's a system," Robert told the others, his voice shaking with rage. "These guys have perfected it. They target married women, wine them and dine them on their husband's money, sleep with them, and then disappear. And our wives fell for it completely." The men sat in silence, absorbing the depth of the betrayal. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single bad decision. Their wives had planned, executed, and covered up infidelity with cold calculation. They'd returned home and resumed their lives as if nothing had happened, sleeping beside their husbands, kissing them goodbye in the morning, all while carrying the weight of their deception. David pulled out a yellow legal pad, his engineer's mind already working through the logistics. "We need to decide our endgame. What do we want out of this? Divorce? Reconciliation? Public humiliation?" "I want everyone to know," Thomas said immediately. "I don't want to be the guy who quietly gets divorced while people whisper about what might have happened. I want the truth out there." James nodded vigorously. "Same. Rebecca's always been so concerned about her image, about what the neighbors think, about her social media presence. She needs to face consequences in the same world where she pretends to be the perfect wife." Robert was quieter, more contemplative. "My kids," he said finally. "They need to know the truth came from me, not from gossip or rumors. They deserve to hear it directly, to understand that their mother's choices destroyed this family, not me walking away." David wrote it all down, creating a framework for their confrontation. "The summer barbecue," he said suddenly. 3 weeks from now. It's already planned, our families, plus a dozen other couples from the neighborhood. Everyone who knows us will be there." The others stared at him, understanding dawning on their faces. "We confront them there," David continued, his voice steady. "Together, in front of everyone. We present the evidence, we tell the truth, and we let them face the consequences of their actions in front of the community they care so much about impressing." "That's brutal," James said, but there was approval in his voice. "So was planning to cheat on your husband with your best friends," David replied. "They coordinated their betrayal. We're just coordinating our response." The plan was set. The 3 weeks before the barbecue were the longest of David's life. Every morning he woke up next to Sarah, every evening he sat across from her at dinner, and every night he lay awake knowing the truth while she slept peacefully beside him. The performance was exhausting, but he maintained it with grim determination. Sarah had noticed nothing amiss. She chatted about her day, complained about work, made plans for their upcoming anniversary. She even suggested they book a couple's trip, perhaps to the same region where she'd had her girls' getaway. "Maybe we could visit that resort I told you about," she'd said innocently. "It really was beautiful." David had smiled and nodded, all while his stomach churned. The audacity of it, to suggest they visit the scene of her infidelity, to perhaps walk the same hallways where she'd kissed another man, to dine in the same restaurant where she'd coordinated her betrayal. Did she feel no guilt at all? Or had she simply rationalized it away, convinced herself it didn't count, that what happened away from home existed in some consequence-free bubble? The four men continued meeting in secret, refining their plan with military precision. They decided against dramatic confrontations or violence. This would be about truth, about forcing accountability, about ensuring that the women who'd so carefully crafted their deception would face its unraveling in the most uncomfortable way possible. Robert had hired a private investigator to compile everything into a professional presentation. The PI had even tracked down Miguel and his friends, discovering that at least 7 other married women had been photographed with them over the past year. The Grand Vista, it turned out, had sent those bills as a form of liability protection, evidence that they'd documented suspicious behavior should any legal issues arise later. They saw our wives cheating and just documented it. Thomas had asked incredulously. "Hotel doesn't want lawsuits," the PI explained. "If a husband claims they facilitated infidelity or didn't provide adequate security, they can point to these records and say they fulfilled their due diligence. It's cold, but it's business." James had spent hours creating a timeline, cross-referencing credit card statements with hotel records and the recovered text messages. Every lie had a timestamp now, every fabricated story had documented truth beside it. When Sarah had called him from the trip saying they were having a quiet night in, the credit card showed room service charges for 8 people and a rooftop bar tab exceeding $400. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and meticulously organized. They'd created folders for each couple, with printed copies and digital backups. This wasn't about he said she said. This was about documentation, proof, and the complete dismantling of any possible denial. As the barbecue approached, the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation, though not for the reasons people would soon discover. Sarah had volunteered to handle decorations, Rebecca was coordinating the food, Jennifer had planned games for the children, and Amanda was managing the guest list. The 4 friends worked together seamlessly, just as they'd worked together to betray their marriages. David watched Sarah hang string lights in their backyard, humming cheerfully as she arranged tables and chairs. She looked happy, carefree even. Part of him wanted to call it all off, to handle this privately, to avoid the nuclear detonation their plan would create. But then he remembered the text messages, the calculated planning, the complete lack of remorse. "This looks great, honey," he told her, and she beamed at him. "I want everything to be perfect," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss his cheek. "This might be our best summer party yet." Perfect. The word echoed in David's mind as he helped her arrange chairs. She wanted everything to be perfect while their marriage crumbled beneath her feet, destroyed by choices she'd made and lies she'd told. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. The night before the barbecue, the 4 men met one final time. They sat in Robert's basement, surrounded by boxes of evidence, each lost in their own thoughts about the lives they'd built and were about to demolish. "Last chance to back out," David said, though his voice carried no suggestion that he would. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Our marriages are over, our social circle will implode, our kids' lives will change forever." "My marriage was over the moment Jennifer decided to plan that trip," Robert said quietly. "I just didn't know it yet. Tomorrow, I'm just making it official." Thomas nodded. Amanda made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences in front of everyone she wanted to impress. James cracked his knuckles, a nervous habit he developed over the past weeks. Rebecca always said reputation was everything. Tomorrow, she finds out what happens when you destroy your own. They synchronized their watches like soldiers preparing for a mission. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., after everyone had arrived and gathered, after the food was served and the casual conversations had begun, they would execute their plan. 4 men, 4 presentations. For marriages publicly ended with the truth as their weapon. David drove home in silence, the weight of what was coming pressing down on him. The July afternoon was perfect, azure sky, gentle breeze, and sunshine warming the gathering crowd in David and Sarah's backyard. Neighbors arrived with covered dishes and bottles of wine, their children racing toward the bounce house Rebecca had rented. Music played softly from outdoor speakers, and the smell of grilling meat wafted through the air. Sarah moved through the crowd in her sundress, playing the perfect hostess, laughing and hugging guests as they complimented the decorations. Jennifer and Amanda worked the food table together, arranging potato salads and coleslaw while chatting with other wives from the neighborhood. Rebecca stood near the grill with her husband, smiling as he flipped burgers and joked with the other men. To any observer, they were 4 couples living their best suburban lives, surrounded by community and celebration. But David watched from the deck, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Beside him stood Robert, James, and Thomas, each man wearing the same expression of grim determination. In Robert's hands was a tablet connected to a portable projector they'd hidden behind the outdoor bar. Everything was ready. At exactly 3 p.m., David stepped forward and tapped a spoon against his glass. The sharp chiming cut through the conversations, drawing attention as neighbors turned toward the deck. Sarah looked up from her conversation, smiling at her husband with such genuine warmth that for a moment, just a moment, his resolve wavered. "Thank you all for coming," David began, his voice carrying across the yard. "Sarah and I are so grateful to have such wonderful friends and neighbors. Today, though, we need to share something important with all of you. Something that affects not just us, but 3 other families here." The crowd's attention sharpened. Sarah's smile faltered slightly, confusion crossing her face as she looked at Jennifer, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. Rebecca had gone very still near the grill, and Amanda had set down the serving spoon she'd been holding. 4 weeks ago, our wives went on a girls' trip to the Grand Vista Resort, David continued. They told us it would be a chance to relax, to spend time together, to decompress from daily life. They shared photos of spa treatments and dinners, sent loving text messages, and came home with stories about what a wonderful time they'd had bonding together. Sarah's face had paled. Around the yard, neighbors exchanged glances, uncertain where this was heading but sensing the shift in atmosphere from celebration to something darker. "What they didn't tell us," David said, his voice hardening, "is that they'd planned to spend that trip cheating on their husbands with men they met at the hotel bar." The silence was absolute. Someone's paper plate fell to the ground, forgotten. Children continued playing, oblivious, but every adult stood frozen. "That's not," Sarah started, stepping forward, but David raised his hand. "Robert, if you would." The projector hummed to life, casting an image onto the white wall of the house. The first photo showed Jennifer in the hotel hallway, pressed against a man who wasn't Robert, their bodies intertwined in obvious intimacy. The timestamp glowed in the corner, 2:47 a.m. Jennifer made a choking sound. Robert's voice was flat, emotionless. "My wife told me she went to bed early that night. Said she was exhausted from the spa. The hotel's credit card records show she bought this man 3 rounds of drinks first. His name is Miguel. He's a bartender who apparently makes a habit of this." The next image appeared, Rebecca leading a different man toward the elevators, her hand in his back pocket. James spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. "This was taken at 1:33 a.m. When I called her at midnight to say goodnight, she told me she and the girls were watching movies in their room. She was very convincing." Amanda's face had gone from pale to grey. Thomas didn't look at her as he said, "My wife's screenshots are similar. Different man. Same pattern. They took turns, coordinated their schedules, covered for each other. This wasn't impulse or mistake. This was planned." More images cycled through, Sarah with her stranger, the 4 women laughing together at the bar while their conquests waited nearby, a group photo of them with the men taken on someone's phone and recovered from deleted cloud storage. Each photo was accompanied by credit card receipts, text message screenshots, email correspondence. The recovered group chat appeared on the wall, and David read select messages aloud. Sarah's voice about creating alibis with restaurant photos. Amanda's instruction to delete everything. Jennifer's joke about what happens at the Grand Vista staying there. The neighbors listened in horrified silence as the full scope of the deception unfolded. "We received these photos from the hotel 4 weeks ago," David said. "Since then, we've spent every day verifying the truth, hoping somehow we were wrong, that there was an explanation. But there isn't. Our wives planned to cheat on us, executed that plan together, and came home to lie to our faces without hesitation or remorse." Sarah was crying now, mascara streaming down her face, but David couldn't bring himself to feel sympathy. Around the yard, neighbors who'd known them for years stared in shock. Some looked away uncomfortably, others whispered to their partners. The 4 wives stood separately now, isolated in their exposure, their carefully constructed social standing crumbling in real time. "We're telling you this publicly for one reason," Robert said, taking over. "Because they planned this publicly, executed it together, and supported each other through the lies. They thought they could keep it contained, that no one would ever know, that they could maintain their reputations while destroying their families in private." "So now everyone knows," Thomas finished. "No rumors, no gossip, no wondering what really happened when these marriages end. Just the truth, documented and undeniable." The silence stretched on until finally, Jennifer broke it with a sob. "We didn't mean, we never wanted." "You never wanted us to find out," James interrupted coldly. "That's different from not wanting to do it." Sarah reached toward David, her hand outstretched in supplication, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said simply. "Whatever you're about to say, just don't. You looked me in the eye every single day for 3 weeks and lied without hesitation. You planned our anniversary trip to the same place you cheated on me. There's nothing left to say." The barbecue dissolved after that, neighbors gathering their children and departing with awkward goodbyes and uncomfortable glances. The bounce house continued to whir softly in the corner of the yard, a cheerful sound in stark contrast to the devastation that had just unfolded. Within 30 minutes, only the 4 couples remained, standing in separate corners of the yard like boxers retreating to neutral corners. Sarah approached David one final time, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. "Can we please talk inside? Privately? I can explain." "Explain what?" David's voice was tired now, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading into exhaustion. "Explain how you planned to betray me for months. Explain how you coordinated with your friends to make sure you all had alibis. Explain how you came home and acted like everything was normal while I had no idea my marriage was already over." "It was a mistake," she whispered. "One weekend that didn't mean anything. We were drunk, we were stupid, You were calculated," he interrupted. "I read your texts, Sarah. Make sure to post photos with timestamps. Delete everything after. That's not drunk and stupid. That's premeditated betrayal." Across the yard, similar conversations were happening. Jennifer sobbed while Robert stood with his arms crossed, unmoved by her tears. Rebecca tried to touch James's arm and he jerked away like she'd burned him. Amanda didn't even try to approach Thomas, who stood alone by the now-cold grill, staring at nothing. "I love you," Sarah said desperately. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Please don't throw away 15 years over one mistake." David laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "You threw away 15 years. I'm just acknowledging it's already gone." He pulled out his phone, showing her the lawyer's contact information already pulled up. "I filed for divorce yesterday. You'll be served tomorrow. I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight." "You can't just. Where am I supposed to go?" "I honestly don't care," David said, and meant it. "Maybe Jennifer has room. You 4 planned everything else together. Figure this out together too." He walked past her toward where the other 3 men stood together near the back fence. Behind him, he heard Sarah's renewed crying, but he didn't turn around. That part of his life was over, ended the moment she decided a weekend of excitement was worth more than their marriage vows. "Everyone good?" Robert asked quietly as David joined them. "Define good," Thomas replied with a bitter smile. I just publicly humiliated my wife of 20 years in front of everyone we know. My kids are going to hate me until they're old enough to understand why I did it. I'll probably have to move because staying in this neighborhood will be unbearable. But I'm not living a lie anymore, so yeah, I guess I'm good. James nodded. My daughter called. She saw videos already. Someone was recording on their phone. She's 16 and she just watched her mother's infidelity presented like a TED talk. But at least she heard the truth from me first, not from some edited clip on social media. Divorce papers are filed, Robert said. Lawyer says it'll be straightforward given the evidence. Jennifer can keep the house. I don't want it anyway. Too many memories of who I thought she was. They stood in silence, for men who'd been casual acquaintances 3 weeks ago and were now bonded by shared trauma and mutual support. Their marriages were over, their social lives would need complete reconstruction, their children's trust would take years to rebuild. But they'd done it together, faced the truth together, and would move forward together. We should form a support group, Thomas joked weakly. Husbands whose wives coordinated infidelity on girls' trips. Why sight? Really rolls off the tongue. Despite everything, David smiled. I was thinking more like a bowling league. Something normal. Boring even. We'll need boring for a while. I can do boring, James agreed. Boring sounds perfect. Behind them, the 4 women had congregated together near the house, their unified front maintained even in their exposure. They'd arrived at the party as friends and co-conspirators, and they'd leave as the same, bound together by shared guilt and mutual destruction. David wondered if they'd remain friends through the divorces, if their bond would survive the consequences of their actions, or if they'd eventually turn on each other as the full weight of what they'd lost became clear. He didn't particularly care either way. Gentlemen, David said, pulling out his keys. I'm going to a hotel. Starting fresh, clean slate. Anyone want to join me? First round's on me. Make it the second round too, Robert said. I'm buying dinner. We should talk about lawyer recommendations, support strategies, how to handle the next few months. They walked toward their cars together, leaving behind the ruins of the perfect suburban afternoon. The string lights Sarah had hung still twinkled in the fading sunlight, casting cheerful shadows over the abandoned food tables and empty yard. In 3 weeks, 4 marriages had gone from seemingly solid to irrevocably shattered. But as David drove away, Robert in the passenger seat and James and Thomas following behind, he felt something unexpected, relief. The performance was over, the lies were exposed, and the truth, painful as it was, had set him free from a marriage that had already ended. He'd just been the last to know. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Please can we talk? I'm so sorry. I love you. I'll do anything. He deleted it without responding and turned off his phone. There would be time for logistics later, division of assets, custody arrangements if there were children involved, the mundane details of disentangling lives that had been woven together for years. But tonight, he just needed distance, perspective, and the company of the only 3 people who truly understood what he was going through. They gathered at a quiet bar across town, far from their neighborhood and the whispers that were surely already spreading like wildfire through group chats and phone calls. Over beer and burgers, they talked about practical matters, lawyers, therapists, how to explain this to family members who hadn't been at the barbecue. My mother's going to say I should forgive her, Thomas predicted. She's old-fashioned, believes in marriage at any cost. She'll say everyone makes mistakes. My dad will probably want to fight her boyfriend, James said. He's protective like that. I'll have to talk him down. My kids deserve better role models than people who stay in marriages built on lies, Robert said firmly. I'm doing this for them as much as for me. They need to learn that actions have consequences, that betrayal isn't something you just sweep under the rug. David raised his glass. To truth, then. And to whatever comes next. They clinked their glasses together, for men who'd lost their marriages but found something else in the wreckage. Integrity, self-respect, and a brotherhood forged in the worst circumstances imaginable. The road ahead would be difficult, marked by legal battles and emotional recovery, by awkward encounters and social rebuilding. But they'd walk that road together, supporting each other through the darkness, proving that even when trust is shattered and love proves false, solidarity between men who refuse to live lies can be stronger than any marriage built on deception. The Grand Vista girls' trip had indeed changed everything, just not in the way their wives had hoped. And as the four men ordered another round and began planning their next steps, they discovered that sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the most honest transformation. They'd been husbands, living in comfortable ignorance. Now they were survivors, armed with truth and determined to build lives where honesty wasn't optional and respect wasn't negotiable. Their marriages were over. But in a strange way, their lives were just beginning.